Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle. Join the official Telegram channel of Rao's IAS Study Circle to stay updated and get all the materials on the Telegram. The link to the channel can be found in the description box.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading from UPSC Civil Services examination perspective. Now today let us take up the new Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 2nd November 2022. These are the list of the news for today's discussion and the timestamp has also been provided in the YouTube description. So on this note, let's start our today's discussion from UPSC Prelims and Mains point of view. Now let's start our discussion with this lead article appearing on page number 6. Now this news is about the truth about India's story. And in this article, the author Kaushik Basu, who was also the former chief economic advisor to the government of India, highlights about the growth story of India. And here he mentions that what makes India's growth story worrying is that slowdown began much before the COVID-19 pandemic. So he has highlighted about the problems with respect to Indian economy. However, he has also reflected another important aspect with respect to the increasing political polarization taking place in the society. And because of increasing political polarization of divide and rule, this has resulted in erosion of social trust. And according to the author, this erosion of social trust in the economy is also impacting investment in India. So the author in this article highlights that the investment rate in India has been on a decline, which had increased in the period of 2005 to 2010 or 12, but has now declined. And one of the main reasons, according to the author, is also erosion of social trust because of increased political polarization taking place in the society. So overall, the author has suggested that India has vast amount of talent, and this vast amount of talent must be utilized in a rational manner with proper policies. And the aspect of political polarization is not only eroding social trust in the society, but it is also making a dent in the Indian economic scenario. And because of decline in investment, it has also impacted India's GDP, particularly with respect to production of goods and services in the country. And because of decreased GDP or decreased production in the economy, this has ultimately led to increase in unemployment, which has been also highlighted through various surveys or various reports with respect to growing inequality in India. Now, another issue highlighted in this article is regarding the disproportionate transfer of income from the top of the pyramid to the lower part. And because of this disproportionate transfer of income, it is further increasing inequality in India. So the author highlights that policymakers needs not only to focus on the top of the pyramid, which comprises of various conglomerates or industries, but the policy should also start focusing on the lower part of the pyramid, comprising small businesses such as MSMEs, farmers and also ordinary laborers, so that there is sufficient transfer of income, and this also decreases inequality in India. So it is on these notes the author has highlighted about the poor economic performance of India, which actually started much before the COVID-19 pandemic. So on this note, let's go through some of the concerns which has been highlighted in this article regarding the slowdown in India's growth story. And the first point highlighted in the article is regarding depreciating Indian rupee as compared to US dollars and increasing inflation in the economy. Although the author has suggested that this as of now is a global phenomena and most economies of the world is facing this problem, and here the author has suggested that this will ease out in time as there are other concerns to be looked into. So the other major concern highlighted in this article is regarding employment generation, which is very low, and also increasing youth unemployment, especially in the age group of 18 to 24 years. Now, unemployment rate is said to be the percentage of labor force which is out of job. And according to CMIE, that is Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, the unemployment rate as of 1st November 2022 in India is 7.6%. Whereas the unemployment rate is higher in rural India as compared to urban India. And this statistics is with respect to 1st November of 2022. Now, if we compare the unemployment rate of October 2022, in India, it was 7.7%, whereas in urban India, it was 7.21%, and in rural India, it was 8.4%. And other than unemployment rate, which itself is a worrying factor, is the percentage of unemployed youth in the age group of 18 to 24 years, which stands at 28.3% in India. Now, this percentage of unemployed youth in India is much higher as compared to other African countries or even Asian countries. So, talking about our Asian counterpart, if we look at Bangladesh, the percentage of unemployed youth in the age group of 18 to 24 years, it is 14.7%. In Malaysia, it is 15.6%, whereas in Indonesia, it is 16%. Now, if we compare this to India, it is much higher at 28.3%. And if we compare this to Middle Eastern countries, in Iran, it is 27.2%, in Syria, it is 26.2%, and in Egypt, it is 24.3%. So we can say that unemployed youth is one of the major concerns with respect to India's growth story. So there is not only a need to provide employment to these youth, but also there is a need for greater investment in the Indian economy, which has also seen a decline because of consistent decrease in India's GDP. So there has been consistent decline in India's GDP even prior to COVID pandemic, and this is what has been highlighted by the author, which is also another major concern with respect to India's growth story. So the GDP in 2016-17 was 8.3%, which decreased to 6.9%, then to 6.6%, then to 4.8%, and during the pandemic it was in the negative, that is minus 6.6%. So the author highlights that 8.7% GDP in 21-22 has only able to wipe out the negative impact of the COVID pandemic. So consistent decline in India's GDP even prior to COVID pandemic can be said to be another major concern with respect to India's growth story. Now, another major concern is that India has performed poorly even when compared to its own high standards, which was set from the year 2005 to 2008. As in these 3 years, India grew at the rate of 9.3%, 9.2%, and 10.2% respectively. So here the author has highlighted that before comparing to global standards, India should also compare its current growth with respect to the high standards it set in the year 2005 to 2008, when India's growth was more than 9%. And because of this, it was able to withstand the global recession of 2008. Now, another major concern highlighted is the aspect of negative growth. Now, negative growth is generally associated with decline in income along with contraction of money supply. That is, there is less money supply in the economy. And negative growth in the economy not only decreases the savings of consumer class or savings of households income, but it also decreases investment in the economy. So we can say that declining wage growth and contraction of money supply are characteristics of negative growth. And according to economists, they view negative growth as a sign of possible recession or depression, as it also results in decrease in a country's GDP because of lower investment. And because of low investment, there is low production in the economy with respect to goods and services. And based on negative growth, another concern highlighted is regarding decline in investment rate. Now, first of all, let us understand about investment rate. So, investment refers to an increase in capital assets and typically includes investment by business, investment in property or dwellings, and investment by government in social capital. An investment rate can be said to be ratio of gross tangible investment to value added, or in other terms, fraction of national income that is spent on investment such as roads, bridges, factories, even human capital. So a part of income which is spent on capital formation. Now this not only add to the assets of the country, but it also provides employment in various sectors of the economy. So firms generally invest for two main reasons or two primary reasons. The first reason highlighted is that investment may be required to replace worn out or failing machinery or equipment or buildings. Now this is referred to as capital consumption and arises from continuous depreciation of fixed capital assets, basically to cater to the wear and tear of machinery or any buildings. The second kind of investment which may be undertaken is to purchase new machinery, purchase new equipment, purchase new buildings, in order to increase the productive capacity of that particular industry. So these are the two major reasons for investment. And because of greater investment in an economy in a given quarter or in a given year, a substantial part of the investment is spent on capital formations such as building roads, bridges, factories, and also human capital. So investment rate during the high growth period remained closer to 40% for 6 years. And because of decline in GDP or because of decline in growth of India, investment rate has fallen to 32.2%. So it means that percentage of national income which is used for capital formation has declined. And this has not only led to decline in investment but has also affected employment in different sectors. Now the author in this article has also linked decline in investment rate to that of political polarization of the society and has stated that given the rise of political polarization and policy of divide and rule, it is likely that societal trust is eroding and this is reducing the investment rate. In turn, falling investment rate is adversely impacting growth and also hurting job creation. So this decline in investment rate is not only impacting the growth story, but it is also impacting job creation in the economy. So obviously the government needs to increase the investment rate so that it leads to job creation and also increase growth of the Indian economy. So as a way forward, this article suggests that the government needs to focus more on the bottom of the pyramid or on the larger segments of the population, particularly small businesses, farmers and ordinary laborers, as compared to its present policy, which focuses only on few rich corporations. The second point highlighted is that there is a need for income transfer to the lower half of the pyramid or those population residing in the lower half. So it highlights that there is a need for fiscal policy intervention to transfer income from the super rich to the population residing in the lower half of the pyramid. And this will also help to reduce the disproportionate inequality in India. So it says that there is ample space for this since inequality in India has risen disproportionately over the last few years. And further, the author suggests that there is a need to create an inclusive society. So it says that even though a divided society is easier to rule, we have to pull back from this and create an ethos of inclusion and trust, and the erosion of which is slowing down investment and adversely impacting job creation and growth. So political polarization in the present circumstances is adversely impacting job creation and also growth of India. So this is the larger message which the author in this article has provided. Thus, this article becomes important particularly from your mains perspective under GS paper 3 regarding inclusive growth and issues arising from it. The next article for discussion also appears on page number 6, and this article is with respect to the critical analysis of State Pollution Control Board. So the title suggests the weakest link in the air pollution fight, and here the weakest link has been highlighted as the State Pollution Control Boards. So the State Pollution Control Boards have been constituted under the Air Prevention and Control Pollution Act of 1981 and also the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1974. And both these legislations provide for constitution of Central Pollution Control Boards and also State Pollution Control Boards. And regarding these pollution control boards, as you can see, a question was asked in the prelims of 2018. So the question here was, how is the National Green Tribunal different from the Central Pollution Control Board? The options were: first, NGT has been established by an act, whereas CPCB has been created by an executive order of the government. No, this statement is incorrect as CPCB has also been created through an act of parliament. So the first statement becomes incorrect. The second statement was, the NGT provides environmental justice and helps reduce the burden of litigation in the higher courts, whereas the CPCB promotes cleanliness of streams, wells, and aims to improve the quality of air in the country. Now, if you look at the year in which these legislations were enacted, the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1974 was enacted earlier. Hence, earlier the mandate of CPCB and the State Pollution Control Boards was to reduce water pollution, and hence in this regard the second statement becomes correct. So here the question was, which of the statements given above are correct? So of course the second statement, that is B, becomes correct, that is true only. So going through this question, what we understand is that we not only need to understand the functions of the State Pollution Control Board and also Central Pollution Control Board, but also the concerns with respect to the functioning of these boards. And this is what has been highlighted in this particular article. Now this article further suggests that given the increase in air and also water pollution in the environment, the role of state pollution control boards have become even more important and more functions have been allotted to them, especially with respect to the National Clean Air Program, as the program aimed to reduce particulate matter in the range of 20 to 30% by the year 2024. And for this purpose, 2017 has been taken as the base year. And also, grants have been provided by the Finance Commission in order to ensure air quality improvements. So given the increasing pollution in environment, the role of state pollution control boards becomes even more critical with respect to reducing air pollution and also water pollution. Now before going into the demerits of the functioning of State Pollution Control Board, first of all, let us go through or look into the functions of Central Pollution Control Board and also the State Pollution Control Board. So the Central Pollution Control Board advises the central government on any matter concerning improvement of the quality of the air, prevention, control and abatement of air pollution. It plans and executes nationwide program for prevention, control and abatement of air pollution. It also provides technical assistance and guidance to state pollution control boards. It carries out sponsor investigations and research related to prevention, control and abatement of air pollution. It collects, compile and publish technical and statistical data related to air pollution. It lays down annual standards for quality of air. And under the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1974, CPCB is also empowered to promote cleanliness of streams and wells in different areas of states by prevention, control and abatement of water pollution. Now talking about the functions of State Pollution Control Board, it plans a comprehensive program for prevention, control and abatement of air pollution and also secure their execution. Advises the state government on matters concerning prevention, control and abatement of air pollution. Collects and disseminates information related to air pollution. Collaborates with the Central Pollution Control Board in programs related to prevention, control and abatement of air pollution, and also inspects air pollution control areas, assess quality of air, and also takes steps for prevention, control and abatement of air pollution. So we understand that State Pollution Control Board, in collaboration with the Central Pollution Control Boards, performs a major function, especially with respect to reduction of air and water pollution from the environment. And given the increase in air pollution, especially in the Indo-Gangetic Plain in the last few years, the role of State Pollution Control Board has become even more important. Also because of extended function provided to the State Pollution Control Board, especially with respect to meeting the requirement under National Clean Air Program and also spending Finance Commission grants in order to ensure air quality improvements. Now, given the falling standards of air quality and also water quality in various areas, particularly in the Indo-Gangetic Plain, it calls for a critical analysis of the functioning of State Pollution Control Board. And in this regard, the article has highlighted three key areas with respect to their functioning. The first concerning area is the composition of the board. The second concerning area is service conditions and leadership issues. And the third concerning areas is inadequate manpower, which effectively results in misplaced priorities. Now talking about composition, it says that the board lacks multi-stakeholder and multidisciplinary approach given the enormous scale of air pollution, especially in the Indo-Gangetic Plain, particularly the NCR region. And lack of such experts in the board also impacts policy decision making with respect to reducing air pollution and also water pollution. And based on this, a concerning fact highlighted here is that scientists, medical practitioners and academics constitutes only about 7% of the board members, and most of the members of the boards have been given additional charge. And since they have additional charge along with other major works, hence reduction of air pollution and water pollution does not become their sole priority area or does not become their main focus area. Another set of concern highlighted here is that most boards do not meet the statutory requirement of having at least 2 board members who have knowledge of and also experience in air quality management. So, a generalist approach further dents policy making, especially regarding reduction of air pollution. It further highlights that many state pollution control boards have presence of industrialist and public sector corporations, which is a clear case of conflict of interest and hampers independent decision making, because such members from industries and public sector corporations would not like to take on any action which might impact the functioning of those industries, especially those industries close to cities. So effectively it highlights that lack of expertise and representation from multiple stakeholders also acts as a hindrance in effective policy making towards controlling air and water pollution. And based on the first concerns comes the second concern, that is service conditions and leadership issue. So it says that chairperson and member secretary do not enjoy a long, stable and full-time tenure, and because of which they are not able to concentrate fully on the task at hand. It further says that in many states, persons in these two posts hold additional charge in other government departments. So obviously they lack clear focus with respect to reduction of air and water pollution. And because of this, their work gets distributed and they're not able to concentrate fully on steps which needs to be taken to reduce air and water pollution. And shorter tenures also does not allow them to understand the intricate nature of their work before they are moved out. And in such a scenario, long-term policy planning, strategic interventions, and effective execution aimed at reducing air pollution becomes extremely difficult. Now coming to the third critical issue highlighted in the article is regarding inadequate manpower resulting in misplaced priorities for the functionaries of the state and central pollution control boards. So it says that at least 40% of all sanctioned posts are vacant across 9 state pollution control boards and pollution control committees for which there is data. An example highlighted here is that vacancy levels in technical positions are as high as 84% in Jharkhand and 75% in Bihar and Haryana. So lack of technical manpower further impacts the functioning of the boards. It further highlights that an inadequate staff strength forces the boards to recast their priorities among their various functions, and this misplaced priorities impacts vital functions of the board such as monitoring industrial compliance, initiating enforcement actions in case of violations, and also setting of environmental standards are often compromised or rather not prioritized. It further says that lesser staff strength also means weaker regulatory scrutiny and poorer environmental impact assessment. So these are the three major areas of concerns with respect to the functioning of state pollution control boards. So as a way forward, best international practices can be accommodated, such as taking good practices from US Environment Protection Agency, which is an independent and autonomous body, and EPA reports directly to the US President. So similar mechanisms can be adopted in India, especially to tackle increasing air pollution. Further, there is a need to increase budgetary allocation, especially for state pollution control boards, so that the problem of inadequate manpower can be sorted. There is a need to ensure that members of central and state boards do not have additional charge so that they can focus on the job at hand and also prioritize pollution control, that is both air and water pollution control. So overall, what is needed with respect to the State Pollution Control Board is to have higher budgetary allocation or higher grant so that they can have a decent workforce, they can have a proper laboratories, and also a mechanism where specialization in the field is valued, incentivized, and also promoted based on good work. Further, there is also need for regular training for field officers and field assistants, as we have seen that the mandate of State Pollution Control Board has been increasing based on increasing air and water pollution in the environment. Thus, this article on critical analysis on the functioning of State and Central Pollution Control Board becomes very important, both from the perspective of GS Paper 3 under Environmental Pollution and Degradation and also under GS Paper 2 with respect to the functions of statutory bodies. And as you have seen that a question was asked by UPSC in the prelims of 2018. Let's take up this article appearing in the text and context section on page number 8. Now this news mentions about the manufacturing of C-295 and India's aircraft industry. So it says that how significant is the setting up of the C-295 transport aircraft manufacturing facility in Vadodara in Gujarat to India's domestic industry. Which are the major companies with India's growing civil aviation sector? How will the procurement of new aircraft boost the defense manufacturing ecosystem? So the gist of this news highlights that on October 30, Indian Prime Minister laid the foundation stone for C-295, which is a transport aircraft manufacturing facility in Vadodara. And this will be set up through a joint venture between Air Defence and Space and Tata Advanced Systems Limited. So Airbus C-295 is a medium tactical transport aircraft and plays a vital role in medical and other emergency evacuation, maritime patrol, gathering electronic signal intelligence emanating from various sensors. And for this particular aircraft, both Indian Navy and Coast Guards have also shown interest. So according to the joint venture, 56 aircrafts will be manufactured, of which 16 will come in a flyaway condition from Spain between September 2023 and August 2025, whereas the remaining 40 aircrafts will be manufactured in India. And this will be delivered between September 2026 and 2031 at the rate of 8 aircraft per year. And the C-295 aircraft will replace presently used AN-32 aircraft. So this is the AN-32 aircraft. So this joint venture between TASL, that is Tata Advanced Systems Limited, and Boeing's Airbus Defence and Space will prove beneficial for India's domestic manufacturing, as it will increase manufacturing capacity for aircraft and its components. An example highlighted here is with respect to Boeing's outsourcing. So it says that Boeing's sourcing from India stands at $1 billion annually, of which 60% of outsourcing is done in the manufacturing sector. Further, this joint venture will also give a boost to the MSME sector, as various components of the aircraft will be manufactured in India, and it will be done by the medium, small and micro enterprises. Further, such joint ventures will also result in improvement of technology in India, as it will result in sharing of critical information and technologies. Now, various examples have been highlighted here. For example, Tata is already in a joint venture with Boeing, which manufactures aerostructures for its AH-64 Apache helicopter and its component. Now, this is the AH-64E Apache helicopter. Further, Tata also makes crown and tail bones for Boeing CH-47 Chinook helicopters. This is the Chinook helicopters. And even Lockheed Martin has joint venture with Tata, which has manufactured more than 180 empennages for C-130J Super Hercules transport aircraft. Now this is the Hercules transport aircraft, and the empennages are these airplanes' tail assembly, which is found at the rear end of the fuselage. So it says that the empennage is the whole tail unit at the extreme rear of the fuselage, and it provides the stability and directional control to the aircrafts. So the Lockheed Martin, in joint venture with TSL, manufactures these empennages for Hercules transport aircraft. Now, another benefit for the defense manufacturing sector is that it will result in creation of job. So manufacturing of C-295 aircraft will itself result in creation of 5,000 skilled jobs, both direct and indirect jobs, and it will also result in creation of unskilled jobs. So overall, such joint ventures results in job creation in the entire aerospace ecosystem. Further, such joint venture also helps expansion of footprint of Indian companies in the global supply chains, especially with respect to major defense and aerospace manufacturers supplying a range of component systems and subsystems for different aircrafts. Now, another important factor highlighted here is that India, working closely with United States and Europe towards Indo-Pacific strategy, has also worked in India's favor, especially with respect to transfer of technology in defense manufacturing. Apart from defense manufacturing, India also has a larger footprint in civil aviation sector as compared to the defense manufacturing. An example highlighted here is that both Airbus and Boeing do significant sourcing from India for their civil programs, and both Airbus and Boeing collectively buy manufactured parts and engineering services worth $650 million every year from more than 45 Indian suppliers. However, there is another area in which India can substantially increase its share is the maintenance, repair and overhaul part, that is MRO. However, as of now, civil aviation companies such as Boeing's do not favor MROs in India because importing parts for repairs are expensive, and also there are complex taxation issues including customs and other duties. So the maintenance, repair and overhaul is another area where Indian companies can also expand their footprint substantially. Thus this topic with respect to manufacturing of C295 in India becomes important, particularly with respect to GS paper 3 under the section of infrastructure. Now let's take up the last two news appearing in the Hindu newspaper from prelims perspective. Now this news appears on page number 11, and this news highlights that Prime Minister calls for a roadmap to develop Mangarh Dham as a global tribal destination. The Prime Minister has highlighted that development of Mangarh Dham will make this area a place of inspiration for new generation. And the Mangarh Dham is situated in the Banswara district in Rajasthan, which is close to Gujarat. So we need to know about Mangarh Dham and the history associated with this dham. So it is located in Banswara district of Rajasthan on the Rajasthan-Gujarat border, and it is known for the massacre of tribal people by the British Army in 1913. Now what happened in 1913 was that nearly 1500 Bhil tribals and forest dwellers were killed in a hill in Mangarh on November 17, 1913, when the British Army opened fire on the protesters as they were demanding abolition of bonded labor system and relaxation in heavy agricultural taxes imposed by the ruler of princely states. So based on their demands, they raised a protest, and in the protest, many of the tribals and forest dwellers were killed by the British Army. And one of the important personality associated with this revolt was Govind Guru, who was a tribal leader and also a social reformer. So Govind Guru, also known as Govind Giri, he belonged to the Banjara community of Dungarpur district of Rajasthan. He was a social and religious reformer in the early 90s in the Adivasi dominated border areas of present-day Rajasthan and Gujarat. He is seen as having popularized the Bhagat movement, which was first started in 18th century, and he was exiled by the rulers of Dungarpur in 1930. So based on the historical importance of Mangarh Dham, the Prime Minister has suggested to make it as a global tribal destination. And in this regard, the Prime Minister has also highlighted that since this area is also closer to Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra, hence all these states together shares a common heritage. And the government of the four states can work together and prepare a roadmap to bring the memorial site on the world map. However, the Prime Minister so far has not declared Mangarh Dham as a monument of national importance, which has been the demand of the locals residing in the area. So this news on Mangarh Dham and its historical importance with respect to killing of Bhil tribals and forest dwellers make this an important topic, particularly from your prelims perspective under Indian history and culture. Now the next important news from your prelims perspective appears on page number 12. Now this news is regarding an invasive tree species, and this news is regarding an invasive tree which is spreading in Mudumalai Tiger Reserve in the Nilgiris. And this news also becomes important because a question was also asked previously in the year 2018 by UPSC in the prelims with respect to another invasive species, which is Prosopis juliflora. So the invasive species in the news with respect to Nilgiris are Senna spectabilis and Lantana camera. So in this news, we need to understand about invasive species and the harm which these invasive species can do. So an invasive species can be said to be any kind of living organisms, which can be an amphibian, which can be a plant, an insect, fish, fungus, bacteria, or even an organism, seeds or eggs, which is not native to the particular ecosystem, and that species causes harm in the area where it spreads. So these invasive species are not native to the area but can harm the environment, economy or even human health. So species that grow and reproduce quickly and spread aggressively with the potential to cause harm are referred as invasive species. And these invasive species are also called introduced species, alien species or exotic species, which significantly modifies or disrupts the ecosystem where it spreads. Now coming to the reason for their spread, these species are mainly spread by human activities, which is often unintentionally, and one of the major reasons for the spread of these invasive species can be associated with globalization, as it has resulted in greater trade, transport, travel and tourism, all of which can facilitate introduction and spread of these species which are not native to that particular area. And such species may arrive in new areas through natural migration, but they are often introduced by activities of other species. So it is in this regard, this news highlights that an invasive species, namely Senna spectabilis, which is an exotic tree, this is the exotic tree, which has taken over between 800 to 1200 hectares of buffer zones of Mudumalai Tiger Reserve in the Nilgiri Hill districts. Now, another invasive species for which the forest department of the region is also concerned is the lantana camara, as it also poses a threat to the biodiversity in both the core and buffer zones of the tiger reserve. Now, this is the invasive species, that is lantana camara. Now, coming to the question asked by UPSC in prelims of 2018, the question was, why is a plant called Prosopis juliflora often mentioned in news? Options were A. Its extract is widely used in cosmetics. B. It tends to reduce the biodiversity in the area in which it grows. C. Its extract is used in the synthesis of pesticides. And D. None of the above. Obviously, in this, the correct answer was B. That is, it tends to reduce the biodiversity in the area in which it grows because it is an invasive species. So coming back to Senna spectabilis, which is an exotic tree, was introduced in India as an ornamental species and for use as a firewood from South and Central America. This species has become highly invasive in the Sigur Plateau in both core and buffer zones of the Mudumalai Tiger Reserve. Now, talking about the Mudumalai Tiger Reserve, it lies on the northeastern and northwestern slopes of Nilgiris, descending to the Mysore Plateau at the tri-junction of Kerala, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, as you can see in this particular map. Now, coming to the impact of these invasive species, as we have discussed that they harm the environment in which they grow. So it says that it can breed and spread quickly, taking over an entire area due to absence of natural predators or controls. Because of the aggressive growth of these invasive species, the native species might not compete with such invasive species. Further, it highlights that there are direct and also indirect threats. The direct threats of invasive species include preying on native species, outcompeting the native species for food or other resources, causing or carrying disease, and also preventing native species from reproducing or killing a native species. Whereas the indirect threats from the invasive species can be the changes which it can make in the food web or in the food ecosystem. And this can be done by destroying or replacing the native food structures. Now, since the invasive species grow very aggressively, hence they outcompete or outgrow the native species. Now, the native species may provide food value for wildlife. So, the wildlife which is dependent on these native species for their food might get impacted because of lack of growth of such native species. So, it also impacts the food chain in the entire area. It further mentions that invasive species can also alter the abundance or diversity of species which are important habitat for the native wildlife. And some invasive species are also capable of changing the conditions in an ecosystem, such as changing soil chemistry or intensity of wildfires. So they can also increase wildfires in an area. So these can be said to be some of the impacts of invasive species in a particular region. Now, mentioning about some of the invasive species of India, we have already seen about Senna spectabilis, which is prevalent in the Nilgiri areas, lantana camara, for which the forest department is formulating a 10-year plan to remove this particular invasive species, as this species has escaped from gardens and taken over the entire ecosystem and as of now occupies 40% of India's tiger range alone. Now, regarding the juliflora invasive species, it is native to Central and South America, also known as Catu andhra. And this plant was first introduced by the British in 1877 as part of an effort to plant it along the arid tracts of southern India. And as of now, it has become a serious problem with respect to the regions. Other invasive species in India includes water hyacinth, snowflake coral, and also parthenium. Now, these invasive species also have an economic cost. So it says that as many as 10 invasive alien species out of 330 which are known to be invasive in India have cost economy roughly around $127 billion in the last 60 years. So there is a need to remove these invasive species as they grow very quickly and aggressively and also threatens the local biodiversity and the ecosystem. Thus, this news becomes important mainly from your prelims perspective under the section of environment. With this, we come to an end to today's discussion. Thank you for watching DNS.